Can you hear us? All right. All right. So with that, I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Are there any comments, corrections, or edits? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Moving to item 5.1, discussion regarding proposed floodplain zoning ordinance. Brandy's going to walk us through what they're looking at, and then we'll have a discussion.
Suppose I better turn my microphone on. All right, thank you guys for allowing me to share some floodplain zoning ordinance information with you. The Federal Emergency Management Agency, or what's known as FEMA, recently updated the flood insurance rate maps for portions of Dane County and the flood insurance study for the entire county.
A little hard to hear, Brandy.
Sorry. Is that better? A little better? Okay. I'm struggling with a head cold, and I have an ear infection, so I can't hear. So I'm tending to talk a little quieter than screaming so I can hear myself. So I apologize. As part of these changes, we're looking at updating a local floodplain zoning ordinance, which is required by April 17th of 2025. As part of this update, there are a couple of policy changes that are being looked at as part of this. And in order to move forward with any zoning updates, we need to bring these policy changes before the village board. So here is just the kind of an overview of just the regulatory structure for the regulations here within Dane County and with the DNR. And what these regulations do is they establish regulations for floodplain, and then what the minimum requirements are for municipal floodplain ordinances that match up with the DNR requirements. And then the DNR also has a model ordinance that they're working through with us to draft to present to you as an update to our ordinance. That was the state regulation side of it, sorry. And then here's the list of just the federal regulations for floodplain requirements through the National Flood Insurance Program. So basically, if you have these parameters and ordinances in place, it is an option that allows homeowners who are within floodplain areas to be able to get insurance for their properties. Currently, there's 3.9 million worth of property value in the village that are covered under floodplain or flood insurance. Just to back up a little bit, when we're looking at the flooding kind of things, we're not looking specifically at any specific areas within the village. What we look at is what are on all of the FEMA and floodplain maps, and that goes out over the 100-year flood measurements throughout that. So there is a community rating system that is a voluntary program that municipalities can take a part of. And there are certain qualifiers that you have to have as a municipality to be able to participate in this program. What this program does is it helps reduce or avoid it helps reduce insurance costs to those within these floodplain areas. If we were to participate in a program like this, it could right now add a 5% discount to those who need to take flood insurance out as part of that program. But there are certain qualifiers that have to happen. There are certain things that we have to do as a municipality to track these type of things. You have to designate a community, what was it called? Ambassador, I'm gonna call it. I can't remember the exact title for it, but somebody that would be in charge of making sure all of these things are monitored and tracked throughout it. There's no cost to be a part of a community rating system other than the cost of staff and maybe consultants for, you know, different types of things that we have to do to prepare for something like this. One moment. So part of the floodplain ordinances does include what's called a legal non-conforming use. And there are certain properties that are built prior to ordinances being put in place. And so a legal non-conforming use means that this property was built before an ordinance actually had stipulations for what could or couldn't be done on that property. The way that that legal non-conforming use works is it's called grandfathering the property in. I don't believe it's intended for the entire life of the property. As the property is rehabilitated or rebuilt or restructured, it's intended that the property comes into. My Italian side coming out. It's intended to bring properties in, you know, to conform with our ordinances, but there is the allowance to do something like that. Right now, if there is damage to any of those properties, they can rehab the property back to the 50% of the equalized value. Is that right? They can bring a property back to 50% of the equalized value if there were some damages caused by flooding and things of that sort. This does not include like large national disasters like tornadoes or, I don't know, ice storm taking down a structure, things like that. This is specifically for this portion is specifically for floodplain areas. So one of the policy questions that is being brought before you to start discussions on as we start to look at updating the ordinances, what does the village want to keep the option of the 50% limitation, or do we want to remove and allow unlimited repairs without making it a conforming structure? So things to consider is these regulations are designed to protect residents of the structures. They're intended to protect emergency personnel responding during flooding conditions to properties that may be affected by floods, and then also reducing the flood damage to other properties. So one of the ideas of this is if you make changes on your property, how does it affect the properties that are around you with water and runoff and things like that, and changing the way the waterways work. And the 50% rule does discourage any major renovations on a property that's currently located within a flood area. So if there were some damage, like I said, you have to, it's only limited, it limits you to 50% of the equalized value that you can actually do. So if, regardless of the 50% rule, living quarters must be at or above the flood protection elevation of 2 feet above the 100-year flood elevation. And right now, I believe that they're limited to, or they're allowed up to 1 foot for that elevation for existing non-conforming structures. Not 100% sure on that. I'm looking at the legal guy. He can noodle on it while I go through the rest of the stuff and correct me there.
For existing non-conforming structures, there's no limit.
Right, for existing non-conforming structures, correct. Thank you. And then here, the building adequately anchored to avoid lateral movement or flotation. I believe that this is more directed towards like mobile homes, things like that. We don't have any of those types of structures within the village at this time. Everything that we have is a foundation-based.
Excuse me, Brandy, that would also apply to accessory structures like gazebos and things like that.
Okay, yeah. And then making sure that the building's constructed to minimize any flood damages. And then mechanicals installed above the 100-year flood elevation, which seems to make sense. You don't want your mechanicals being underwater. And then also adequate site drainage to minimize flood hazards. The second policy question is regarding the CRS, the community rating system that I talked about initially. Is it something that the village wants to consider to provide residents with discounted premiums on flood insurance? So this is just kind of a quick overview of the policy questions that we're bringing before you. Al is here to answer any more detailed kind of questions on this, and be happy to discuss, kind of walk through what these would look like for the village, so on and so forth.
Okay. Well, it looks like Rebecca has a question.
Certainly surprised. Could you clarify what you mean when you, related to that 50% rule discourages major renovations and that they can only go to 50% of the, what did you call it?
Equalized value?
Equalized value.
Mhm.
Is that of their assessed value, or when you say equalized value, what are you referring to? Are you talking about overall the village or just that house?
The equalized value
Building.
is the fair market value determined by Department of Revenue for each property. It's basically your assessed value multiplied by your equalization factor, which is the percentage of fair market value that you're assessing at.
Mhm.
So if your a building is assessed at $100,000, but you only have a 95% equalization factor, in other words, you're assessing at 95% of the value, the equalized value would be $105,000, something like that.
Okay. So,
Your question is, how does it fit into the 50%?
yeah, basically that, but I guess, boy, this is hot, sorry. I'm curious about this rule about the 50% of that. Why would we not allow them to renovate back to the full value? And I understand the discouraging major renovations, but does that include just getting it back to where it was before, prior to the flood? When I think major renovations, I think changing things versus just putting it back to the way it was.
It could include additions. It could include structural repairs. It could be, structural renovations. Anything structural is going to be considered beyond maintenance. I mean, you can paint, you can wallpaper, you can put up siding, those types of things. Those are considered maintenance. But if you're doing renovations of the structure, those count against the 50%. The way it works is if you pull a building permit to say add a garage, Okay, you look at the value of that property, the equalized value of the property, and if the garage is less than 50% of the equalized value of the current building, you could do it. The next time you come in for a building permit to add a porch onto the house, that gets added to the previous amount that you spent on improvements compared with the then current equalized value of the property. And whenever you get to the point where you've taken out so many building permits or done so many additions or modifications to the property that you end up going over what is currently the 50% equalized value, that permit wouldn't be allowed unless the entire building were brought into conformity with the floodplain ordinance.
That was where I think I was getting a little confused. So this is for the non-conforming grandfathered properties.
Right.
Okay, so if they're wanting to go beyond that 50%, then they need to get their property to conform.
Right. If they're in conformity with the current floodplain ordinance, they can do any kind of renovations as long as those renovations are also consistent with the code.
Okay, thank you. That clarified what I needed clarified.
Thank you, Rebecca. Do we have a map of the homes or the properties that are currently in floodplain in the village?
I do, but I do not have it available tonight to share with you. We may have a layer on GIS with the floodplain in it that kind of shows where that floodway is, but I'm sorry, I don't have anything available this evening.
My guess is there are not a lot of properties, buildings actually in the floodplain areas because the $3.9 million worth of property that's covered by flood insurance is not a lot of houses in the forest.
Right.
And that suggests to me that either there aren't very many in the floodplain or there are a lot of them that are in the floodplain that either don't have flood insurance or were able to get it outside of the federal program. In order to get a federally backed mortgage, you have to have flood insurance if you're in a floodplain. So if there are people out there that don't have federally backed mortgages and are in the floodplain and decided to go without insurance, they certainly could be out there. But with only 3.9% under the federal program, I just don't think there are that many that would be affected.
Lynn, did you have your hand up?
Just for my own edification, I was
Gotcha.
just gonna ask Brandy can you just throw me out a street or an area that might be a floodplain?
Corner of North Stevenson and Highway V, where the big Dispo Forest Business Park sign is there. There's some properties on the south side of the street.
Probably some of those properties by the Lakes of DeForest off of the by Dennis Drive.
Mhm.
I can tell you my personal history. That's why I raised my hand. That my home on the 800 block of Acre Parkway was in the flood, 100-year flood. I had to go through an effort to get it out, but the map shows it in. But now I live on Acre Parkway in the 200 block and I'm not because it's a bit higher. So there is homes on, say, that back up the Western Green that are in the floodway. I should say.
Harvard Drive area there, right?
I do think floodplains can change as well.
So, did you have a? Thank you, I appreciate that. Bill Chang and then Bill.
So just speaking from some experience in Arcadia, their whole downtown was in the floodplain. And so the whole purpose of the program, the federal policy is that the more value you can remove or prevent for being in the floodplain, it means 3 times that amount of money in recovery. So that's what's encouraging the discounts off of the policies to try to get a more restrictive ordinance to remove those structures from the flood fringe and the floodway.
Thank you. Bill Landgraf.
Yeah, along those lines, it says 1 foot above floodplain, and then the option to go to 2 feet above floodplain. That's a foot can mean a lot. And we have a current floodplain map. Are we talking that it's going to change slightly or not much, the lines?
I don't anticipate that the lines for the floodplain maps are gonna change significantly.
Right. What percentage of the residents would benefit from, like a 5% discount? Because like Al said, unless you have an FHA that's required, the other ones are on their own. So would anybody really benefit from us participating in this program? It doesn't sound like a lot, but you don't want to exclude anybody.
Yeah, I don't know if you recall, we had made some changes to the floodplain ordinance last year. And one of the things that was brought up when we had to notice the people along that area was how many people were along the actual floodplain. And it was about 300 throughout the entire village. But that takes it all the way down the Yahara
Right.
River, not just specifically to this area up here, but so there were 300 people within that floodplain area that we had to notice for some changes to that ordinance. How many of them actually carry floodplain insurance? I couldn't answer that question. And I don't know that out of the 300, all of them were specifically in the floodplain. They may have been on about the boundary of it.
I'm just wondering if it's worth it to go into this with more restrictions. Of course, you don't want somebody, if somebody wants to build above their 60%, 50% to rehab it, that's fine. Comes to mind across the street from Baki, the old bait shop.
Right.
They've been flooded 2 or 3 times in the past 20 years, and each time a new furnace, new water heater, electrical. But that's, say $15,000, $20,000. I could see, Trustee Witherspoon talked about, 50% damage. Well, in that case, the foundation could get exposed and washed away. And then you're talking, major damage. But my concern was, is it worth it with the further restrictions for such little benefit to, it seems like a minority of people.
Mhm.
Also on Halser, across the street from, what's the name of that park?
Doll.
Doll Park, where it's flooded. Numerous times people have had flooded basements there. I remember 25, 28 years ago,
Mhm.
that got flooded, completely. It wasn't rushing water washing away, but still furnace, water heater, electrical, mold, of course, is now a big thing. Mold, they can almost destroy a house.
And that area is technically not in the floodplain.
Right, and it should kind of be, but, that was my main thing is, will it benefit
The value, right?
enough? Yeah, thanks.
And do we know the answer to that?
I don't know that we know the full answer to it. I mean, one of the things I look at on the other side of things is tracking that equalized value and improvements through building permits, right? That's a big trackability kind of thing on the village's side, and somebody has to be in the know all the time when issuing permits along the way to be able to calculate out that kind of information. Not anything different than what we would do right now for somebody wanted to improve, their property in one of those areas. I think that if we look at not the 50% itself, but that community rating system, that is also a value because it's staff time. We've got to dedicate a lot more hours to getting things like that set up or what have you. But overall for a municipality, I mean, Al might, have an opinion on how it would benefit us as a whole.
I think there are 2 aspects to it. The discount on flood insurance is a nice thing. It's an encouragement to municipalities to do what is already a good idea, in a sense that if you're going to build in a floodplain, building your basement up 2 feet above the flood elevation level is smarter than building it 1 foot above the flood elevation level.
Mhm.
Yes, people are still going to get flooded every once in a while, but how often, how much damage is going to be done, how much their building is going to influence the flood elevation level that might then back up to the next neighbor who wouldn't have been flooded. There are a lot of factors that go into it. And I think the question is not so much whether the 5% or potentially 10%, if you go an extra foot, discount on flood insurance is the only reason to do it. I think the question is, as a matter of policy, do you want to make it harder for people to get flooded out?
And is there any cost to the village if people are in a floodplain and they've gotten building permits or development permits? Are we liable? Do we have any liability?
No.
Okay. And Bill, my other question is the CRS, that stands for Community Rating System, is that correct?
Correct.
And
Mhm.
to join the community rating system, what would we have to do?
Well, there's no monetary investment with it at all, but there would be, we'd have to work with, I believe it's the DNR. They do a site, village assessments, and rectify any open violations that are through there. There's several tracking mechanisms. It's like a 3 or 4 page checklist that we would have to go through for tracking. They want to ensure that we store files properly, file retention, things of that sort. But I think initially it would just be a little bit of legwork, but after that it would just kind of maintain itself as long as we, kept up on making sure that we
Sort of the Cliffs Notes version of that is you have to apply as a community to become a member of the program. And then you basically have to have some slightly higher standards in your ordinances, and you have to demonstrate that you're monitoring and complying and enforcing the ordinance as it's written.
And what is the benefit to doing that?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Is there any benefit to doing that for us as a village?
Not to the village as an entity. The only direct benefit would be to the people who have flood insurance through the National Flood Insurance Program. They would get a discount on their premiums. The other benefit is what I talked about before, the benefit of having a house that's a little bit higher than what the water is more often than not.
Bill Chang, you had your hand up, and then I see you, Jim.
Yeah, you had asked the question about, what is the cost to us as a government? Things that we need to think about here is if you move away from the 50% and you allow for an unlimited amount, that means potentially more folks living in the floodplain and the floodway. Which means that in a event, 100-year flood, 200-year flood, 500-year flood, intensive events, and I don't know where exactly in the village there may be flowing water, but then you got to think about emergency response, public safety, et cetera. So those are, although it doesn't happen much when there's intense rain events that we may have, that's where the cost of the village would apply.
Jim.
Somebody please correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding of the floodplain too is it's based on like the hydraulic studies. So that's say the lay of the land. And I think where say the 1 foot and the 2 foot buffers that they start talking about is that those are say good practices, because when there's often a flood event, you get debris backing up the river. So it actually can go above the 100-year because it's not, again, based on just the hydrology, it's the backing up of, say, the woody debris and stuff. So I think that's something else to take into account. I will say my opinion, I still feel like 1 foot is enough versus 2, but we do need to take some of that thought going forward. And also my opinion, I think the 50% rule is a good rule. It's something that's been around for 20+ years, or as long as I've been in the profession.
Thank you. Bill Landgraf. And then I see you, Rebecca.
Isn't the 50% rule, your house burns and it's more than 50%, your grandfather before, now it's non-conforming, correct? For a garage or any structure that burns more than 50% of the value, it's now non-conforming, correct?
It's non-conforming because it doesn't meet the letter of the current ordinance.
Right,
It's legal non-conforming because it's grandfathered.
right.
Mhm.
So even though it doesn't comply, we say, we're going to look the other way because you were here first.
Oh, okay.
But over time, we don't want to have non-conforming structures. We want them to go away. We want them to be brought into conformity. So, you know, over the next 50, 60, 70 years, when you start having to make major repairs to it, at some point you got to say, this car's costing me too much. I'm going to go get a new one, or I'm going to move it to a place where it really should be.
And do you know what flood insurance costs, say for a $400,000 house? I mean, if we're looking at, 5%, say it's $3,000 a year extra, so that's only $150. We're not talking a lot, but
Yeah, I'm not,
I have no idea. I live on a hill, so all the water goes down. That's the golden rule, live on a hill.
I don't know what the premiums are, but I've heard people say they're very expensive.
Yeah, I've
Yeah.
heard that too.
That's all I've heard, yeah.
That could mean a lot of different things, but people consider it very expensive.
I'm looking at the insurance lady over here, but
Yeah, there you go.
There's so many variables that go into those rates, you really can't say. Regarding on a $400,000 home, it depends how much coverage you want, because a lot of them, the coverage starts low, like $25,000 of coverage. Because you're thinking, oh, it's just gonna be those bottom floors, how much do you want? So how much coverage are you gonna have? 25,000, 400,000? And then do you include your contents in there? Where on the floodplain are you? What letter are you? And then what deductible? It's really hard to say, but in general, it's just, they're expensive.
and I don't imagine, bringing it up, there are the variables that come into place. We don't live on Lake Delton, right? Where $700,000 houses are gonna wash away, down the river, hopefully. That's, you never know, I guess, with a 500-year flood, but,
Just one other clarification. Under this ordinance, regardless of which way you go, if the house is destroyed by a fire, a tornado, windstorm, hailstorm, the 50% rule doesn't come into play. Those repairs are free.
okay,
Well, they're not free. They're
Covered.
free as it relates to the 50%.
right, right. Rebecca, you had your hand up.
Yeah, so all things aside, the floodplain zoning, for our floodplains currently, the zoning is what, 1 foot above the water level, the 100-foot water line? Is that correct?
yes.
Okay.
Living quarters, I think, have to be 2 feet above.
Well, yeah, where you lay your head, yeah. And then the electrical and all that's supposed to be at least a foot.
Right.
And so if we went with what they're or what is being suggested here, that would increase that by the lower one to 2 feet. Is that right? I'm trying to wrap my head around everything that we've been talking about. I'm understanding all, I'm just trying to get the minutia.
Basically, the minimum requirements, there's several different minimum requirements. There's a lower basement floor elevation that has to be above the regional flood elevation unless You can go, you can actually go below it as long as the area below it is flood proofed by some sort of engineering practice that makes it. It's complicated, but there's also elevation for the living quarters, elevation for the lowest floor level, generally, and they all vary. But the question is really, do you want to go 1 foot above what the minimum is for all of those? It's a 1 foot increment that would qualify you for.
Moving forward. Okay. Okay, so then, other than that, I agree with some of the other comments here tonight that I don't think I want to change the 50% rule. I think that's a good place to be at. Because eventually we want these places to conform. And it's kind of like when we were up north, we decided to tear down our old place and rebuild our new place. We had to consider, did we want to build onto the existing or just raise it and go for new? We ultimately chose a new one but that meant we had to set back further. And otherwise it would have just been 1.5 times, and that's it, which was nothing because it was not that big. So I like this 50% because it makes people have to conform eventually. And I'm neither here. With our current zoning in the floodplain, have people experienced significant loss due to our zoning? Or, I mean, do you guys feel that we need to increase that to that 1 foot above for everything?
I can't speak to which properties are in the floodplain or not, but I mean, I know there has been some flooding. You've had people in here talking about flooding that they've had on their properties. I'm guessing those weren't even in the floodplain, but they could be. So since I don't know what's in the floodplain, I can't tell you whether any of those were a problem. I know you have flooding problems in the village. And whether our current ordinance would have changed, if the new ordinance would have changed anything, I couldn't say.
Yeah, that's really my only question, because I mean, if it's kind of hard to say, yeah, let's change it if we don't have that kind of information. Sorry, that's just where my thinking is going.
Yeah, no,
I'm not opposed to changing. I want to change it because we need to change it, not because well, it's a thing to do. If that makes sense, sorry.
And don't be sorry. That's a valid point. So one of my other questions is a definitional one. There's lots of different kinds of wetland or land that could be lowland. What is the definition of floodplain? I know that's basic, but.
Want me to handle that?
Nope. I mean, I can generalize.
Oh, I asked if you wanted me to handle it.
Oh, yes, I do.
Figured you would.
Yes.
Floodplain is comprised of two types of land, floodway and flood fringe. Okay. The floodway is the bed of a creek or a river, and the area adjacent to that's necessary during a 100-year flood event to carry water downstream. Okay. The flood fringe is the area upland from that is flooded during the 100-year storm, but basically with standing water as opposed to water that's flowing downstream, I guess.
Right, and to me, sorry, the engineering, I mean, the floodway is what moves the water. The flood fringe is the storage.
Holds it.
I just said that in
Or is it the two of them together that makes up the flood?
That was helpful.
Another caveat to that is on the map, there is a line that's horizontally drawn. And that is what a lot of insurance will look at, is that horizontal line. But that horizontal line is really based on an elevation. So that's where you get to actually, that's say what happened to my house on the 800 block. Horizontally, it was showing in, but I had to go and prove elevation wise that it was not correctly drawn. So it's really based on an elevation, even though it's a horizontal line. If that makes sense.
Okay.
So I just want to add to that because I'm still in the 800 block of acre. And I know that when I first bought my house 20 years ago, it was in the floodplain. But then that changed and I didn't know why that changed. I'm wondering if you did that for us.
Probably.
Because it did change.
Send him cookies for Christmas. All right, so we can't make any decisions tonight, but
Well, we're just looking for direction. I mean, this will all be part of the new floodplain ordinance that we're putting together. What we wanted to get from you is a sense of, should we include the provisions that take out the 50% rule? Should we include the provisions that'll be necessary to comply with CRS? Or should we just ignore that? So
I think I've heard maintain 50%. I'm not sure I have heard much about CRS, although okay. Kind of neutral on CRS, is that your position? Where are you, Jim?
I guess I could go either way, but to me, it's a pretty minimal number of residents that we're talking about. And it seems like it's quite a bit of effort for the 5% reduction on maybe 200 homes or even 150 homes.
Okay. All right. I think that's where people are.
Thank you very
we
much.
need,
When do we have to redo the rules about how close you can build to a waterway and all of those? Didn't we just do those about? Okay, all right.
Yeah, I think we're talking about floodplain, but some of that is the shoreline zoning.
Yep, no, I
That-
know that the difference, I think those rules were, at some point have to be updated. Okay. Thank you for all your work on that. And Brandy, you might want to make this presentation available in our packet. That would be great. Okay, update regarding the DeForest Police Department, Chief Olson. Here he comes. No uniform tonight. I'm impressed.
Trying something new, casual December, we figured it'd be a bit easier here. Let me try to pull this up. And there it is. Okay, thanks. Good evening. I haven't had the opportunity to kind of stop over and update you. It's been a little development driven year, it seems like, and things. So I thought it'd only be fair to offer a little bit of update to what's going on at the PD and give you a chance to kind of ask any questions or things that you might have. So I'll try to make this quick because I know we're pressed for time, but really just to give you some operational things that are happening, some current focus areas for us, and things that we're still seeing in the community. Hopefully you can help message, and then just talk about some of the efficiency in the community programs that we're kind of working through. So traffic crashes is the first thing I always want to kind of highlight a little bit. Our crashes still become a area of concern for us. Traffic is a very high level compared. We're seeing more and more traffic come through, whether it be on Highway 51, whether it be through the village itself. We seem to have a lot of private property crashes in the 600 block of Main Street. Yeah, anecdotally, somebody drove through a cart corral about 2-3 weeks ago, hit about 6 cars on a weekend, a Friday night, but there's a lot of private property crashes, it seems like, in that area. So driver behavior is still concerning. While we've seen a reduction in impaired driving incidents, we still see dangerous driving that we're trying to stay on top of throughout the village. So, and then again, crashes are still up. Where we thought we had we've curved some of the severity issues. We're still seeing significant, what I would call a significant number of crashes for a village our size. So again, the first one was just dots on the map. This kind of gives us a little bit of a heat map generation just so we can see the high propensity numbers and kind of know where to deploy. You can see the Main Street, what I'm talking about right here, this area is probably the highest area for crashes through the village. But we still use this. We talked significantly, probably a couple years ago now, about our data-driven approach to crime and traffic safety and how we deploy resources to try to have an overall impact. So we're still using that model. We've been a little bit challenged with staffing. I'll talk about that here towards the end. But we do have this issue spread throughout the village. We've had it focused in a couple of intersections for a while, heavy deployments. We dispersed those intersections, had a lot less severity of crash, but now it's just, they've kind of popped up a little bit all over the village. We have been thankfully fortunate, if you will. There's been 9 traffic fatalities in the vicinity. One was ours. We had our first one in over 6 years here earlier, a couple of months ago. It was a single car crash that really wasn't, unfortunately, I don't have any kind of definitive final answer from like the ME's office as to what BACs or thing, if that was a contributing factor. I don't know that we'll ever get that answer back. Any loss of life is terrible. I don't want to see it in any regard. But it's a single car crash, one occupant in the vehicle. So we still do focus on that. These are just a couple of pictures from it. We were able to use the resources we have, kind of fly the drone back and see to make sure there was nobody else hit and knocked into the ditch on 51 or anything else that we could have done. So you see, obviously, any crash can cause fatal consequences to it, but significant property damage, light poles, vehicles, all that kind of stuff. So we kind of still use and deploy our resources as best we can. The grants that you approve us to participate in every year, we use those specifically to add extra layers throughout the village. It's not just focused on one area. The grant may specify a couple areas, but we can go anywhere in the village for that purpose. That's where our traffic data model comes in very handy for us. Some of the patrol vacancies have led to a little bit shortage of trying the on-shift deployments, but we still had the grants to supplement. So that's been very helpful for us to try to keep up. The other thing we really try to focus on, and we're still working on, is I call it investigative efficiency. I frequently tell staff you have to act with urgency. We cannot just take an assignment and say it's an assignment, right? If there's some kind of lead, you have to follow up. We did have some very good success this year doing that. The cases are getting, it seems like, more complex. So it's taking a little bit more of the resource, a little bit more of the time, but it still is an important thing for us to do. One of the things with acting with urgency has helped us with, in the case that we had somebody steal a bunch of tools from a local business. One of the staff member who responded in their early afternoon recognized the suspect. We kind of knew where they lived. Working with that other jurisdiction, we used our search warrant team, and they went and executed the search warrant, got the tools and all the property back, plus some other stolen stuff that another business didn't even know was taken within like 12 hours of report to us. So we talk about it quite frequently, especially at the supervisory level. Get staff on top of things. Don't let it sit. I don't care who it is. Everybody deserves the same response from us. So we need to keep doing that as well. The search warrant team has been really, really helpful for us. Again, we started it like a year ago. 7 deployments in 2024. These were people who volunteered from inside of our agency that wanted to be a part of the team. There you can see them, they're going to execute a search warrant in the video. I don't have the sound on purposely because these are what I would call low-level search warrants. So not gun related, not drug related, nothing that, we would need a specific kind of response. We don't do no-knock search warrants, but it is something that we continue to train on. The other thing that's really been handy with the search warrant team is it's really increased staff competence. I mean, God forbid anything like happened yesterday happened here or anywhere else for that matter. I want our staff to be as prepared as they possibly can. And the ability to go through clear buildings, even like alarms at local businesses when they have to go in, we find they become much more proficient now, especially the ones who are part of the team because they're sharing their knowledge. The team went to 2 different 3-day trainings with Milwaukee PD, their tactical unit, which is the only full-time tactical unit in the state. I called some favors in and they did 2 separate 3-day blocks of training on how to execute search warrants, how to room clear at a high level, how to just basically do these things safely. And the staff was able to take part in that, and then they keep training from there on. So they're gonna do some more training. One of the tools you can see, I think that's Jake, he's got a sledgehammer in his hand. They learned really quickly, it's not the most efficient way to get through a door. So using asset forfeiture money, we're able to get a ram, which is a lot quicker way to pop open a door if you need be. And then we are also through basically this is a seizure, a federal seizure. We also bought a rifle rated shields. That's what I asked you about earlier for budget. We took that out of the budget. We were able to get it through resources that we had basically confiscated drug money, and it came back to the village. So that team has been really helpful. And then, of course, everybody's favorite. I didn't bring him along as show and tell because Bill said I try to steal the thunder when I do. But Cairo, just a little update on him. He's doing really, really well. Most of the deployments he's had has been community relations at first, just because we had a significant amount of donors, gave a bunch of money to the foundation that, we thought it's important that they kind of pay back. He does his training. He's doing really, really well at training. He's got a great nose. He has tracked people from stolen cars in the village. He tracked one through a soybean field, and he went right to where the person got picked up by a car about 2 minutes before he got there. So he is right on the right path and kind of all over, but he is progressing quite well. So significant support from the community. He'll be around. We still want to make sure we get to connect a little bit more with you all, probably in the new year. Just see a little bit more of his capabilities, have him find some drugs and stuff for you. I've opted not to get a DEA license right now for the department because where he goes for training has a DEA license. So we can get synthetic drugs for him to hit on a lot cheaper than we can have to, secure other stuff from the DEA. So plus I don't have to worry about storing extra drugs, who can handle it and all those kinds of things. So last thing is the staffing update. 2 of our recent hires have just graduated from the academy last week. Pete Christensen and Connor Haston. They graduated, Connor from Madison Tech, Pete from Milwaukee Tech. They'll start field training right after Christmas. So the 26th and 27th respectively. We did really, really well with our recruiting, our last recruiting. We didn't even do a bunch in the recruiting drive, if you will, but we did a lot leading up to it. 56 total applicants, 27 that we called qualified. In other words, they took the test and had a passing score. And then 7 of them went to the police commission, and the day of, one of them dropped out. He was a reciprocal, but he dropped out. So we had a total of 6, and we were able to secure the last one who starts the academy January 13th. So that will, in May, hopefully when he gets out of the academy, that'll put us back at full strength. So I know it was quick, I apologize, but I felt important to give you some update.
Oh, we appreciate the
If there's questions, I'm always happy to take them.
questions. I think, Jim,
I guess I don't know if we can go back and move the Cali thing to see the different crashes, but I guess if this PowerPoint right there and the next one, or the next one, no, back.
Oops, sorry. There you go.
It'd been nice I can't see what's going on at
Oh.
51 and V. But
Let me find
I'm assuming the green is the personal property. Is the blue the type C?
Yeah, I think the blue, if I remember right, blue is the injury, the green is just a crash reported.
Yeah, I'm assuming it's type C is probably blue, type B is yellow, and
Yeah, I gotta remember where he was pulled this from, because I had him pull the map for me. I don't know if he pulled it off the DOT.
it looks like a DOT thing, so.
Very possible he goes to community maps and doesn't.
Okay, well, thank you very much. That's what I wanted to see.
have you noticed any reduction in accidents at the corner of Vinburn and 51 or Northtown?
I can't zoom in. I remember anecdotally a couple of them, but nothing like we used to experience before we had the stop sign. I think the first step with the slowing the speed down helped a little bit. We saw a reduction in the severity of crash. Putting the stop signs there has led to a reduction in crashes. Again, Jim would probably attest to, all these measures aren't going to prevent a crash from happening. It's reducing the severity when a crash does happen.
Okay. Anything else? If not, well, thank you. And we're all anxious to see Cairo again. All right, thank you. Bill, update regarding university program?
I'm not gonna get through this in 3 minutes, so I would recommend that we postpone that update. There's no time frame for that. I can bring that at the next meeting.
Okay.
I do have administrator update for you in regards to Fire Station 2 and kind of where that is currently. And then Churchill condos. So the RFP for the design work has been issued by the Village of Windsor. If you remember the intergovernmental agreement that we have with them, the design is split into two different phases. Phase 1 is the initial program design, facility design, and the stage 2 is where it gets into the engineering, et cetera. So there are some critical dates here that we'll need to pay attention to. Proposals are due back to Windsor by January 9th of 25. This timeline contemplates the firm completing phase 1 by June 30th, 2025. That's a critical juncture because the consultant will need, and Windsor will need both the DeForest Board recommendation, Windsor Board recommendation, and then district recommendation to move on to phase 2. At that point, before moving on to phase 2 is the point where we will need to look and review at how does the financing for Fire Station 2 look like. If we want to move to phase 2, we need to have those answers taken care of. This timeline has then phase 2, so assuming that we move forward, phase 2, providing recommendation and bidding December 3rd of 2025. December final, so recommend approval by December 18th, and then bid notice to paper January 9th of 2026. So it looks like construction in 2026 and construction completion by July 1st, 2027. So again, a lot of things to do between now and then. There are kind of milestones in here that the approvals will need to come back to the village for a recommendation. But we should have some answers in regards to costs, projections. I know there's some discussion with Chief Lipfaber about operations and how do we, if we have a building, how do we fill it, equipment, et cetera. That does it for that update. I'll bring more information as soon as I have it. The second update here is in regards to Churchill condos. We did file a complaint against Bear Tree Farms Incorporated. This is for the site plan violations related to the proposed plans, the as-built, the grading, stormwater, et cetera. And so we'll wait for a response on that. And if and when we do move to whether it's mediation or whether it's a court process, I'll let you know.
Okay, thank you. All right, I assume we got most of what you wanted to give us, Chief Olson? All right, public services? Oh, Carol, I'm sorry.
I actually have an update tonight. Wanted to let you know that we did complete our search for a vendor to handle our water rate studies. So we will be, we now have an agreement in place with Clifton Larson Allen, and they will begin collecting data soon to get that started. Expected cost will be under $10,000. And our plan is to, as we gather up information for 2024 to give to our auditors, we will then share that same information with CLA, and then they will have a report to you hopefully by end of May, early June, to see where they would recommend our rates go from there.
Thank you.
Other thing I wanted to just share was that tax bills went out last week. So people have been receiving those in the mail. We've gotten people in already paying their taxes. We do have for this year an option to pay online. At the moment, only the credit card portion is set up and working, but we are working really hard to get the ACH option also set up so that they'll be able to do it that way as well. The fees that PSN charges will go to the customers, so they are the ones that will have to pay that. The credit cards have a 3% fee, but the ACH option will be like a really small, like $2 fixed fee. So as soon as we get that up and running, we will start to put that out on the website and really advertise that that's an option. For right now, we haven't really done that because we don't have that ACH option out there yet. But as soon as we get everything working, we'll put that out on the website and let people know that that's available.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, Judd Blau, are you still online? Okay. Alex? No? Callie?
I just want to give an update or a reminder, I guess, that if your seat is up for reelection in the spring election, and you are planning to not run, I do need you to turn in a non-candidacy form no later than 5 p.m. on the 27th of December. Otherwise, paperwork is still due on the 7th of January. And we are just busy with tax collection. Today, you can tell people have gotten their bills yesterday because many, many people were in the office today.
Right? Any comments? Any comments from the people paying their bills?
Nothing really. It's the normal, typical. Nobody's happy, but they're not rude. We have a very polite community typically when it comes to working with our front desk staff. So that's the normal.
Thank you. And then Callie was going to handle Reese's recreation and community enrichment.
Yes, Reese wanted me to let everybody know that on December 1st, the online program registration program will be down. We are not able to accept program registrations online or in person. That is because they are doing some internal maintenance and updating the system, which requires everything to be shut down. She will be notifying the public through social media, and there'll also be a banner on the website saying, if letting people know if they have gone there that they have to wait. And everything will be back up and running by 12:01 on the 1st. So it is just a 1-day downtime. January 1st, did I say? It's down for a year. No, January 1st.
Okay.
And if you have any questions about it, you can give Reese a call.
Thank you. All right. We don't have a closed session in committee of the whole, and there's no action from closed session. So any other business to come before this body? If not, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Meeting's adjourned at 6:04 p.m. All right. Call the regular village board meeting to order on Tuesday, December 17th, 2024 at 6:13 p.m. I would ask Callie to note roll call, and I would ask Tashidra to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Announcements. The village board will convene into closed session pursuant to section 19.851E of the Wisconsin statutes for purposes of deliberating or negotiating the purchasing of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session. Tonight, considering tax incremental financing requests from J.T. Klein Company Incorporated and considering a cost share request from Bucky's Inc. Consent agenda, approval of the minutes. I would entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Is there a motion and a second? Any comments, corrections, edits? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. I would ask, I didn't get any general public appearance forms tonight, Callie. Did you have any? Okay. All right. So tonight we have two public hearings. We'll open the first one, which is public hearing regarding a resolution allocating sewer extension costs and levying special assessments against properties specifically benefited by the construction of sewer extensions to serve areas west of Interstate 90, 94, 39. Bill, do you want to give us a summary?
Yes, I can do so. So the resolution is part of the packet here. And then the attachment to the resolution is a report on the assessment. Let me first dive into the report and how we came to the cost allocation for the assessment amounts and the connection fees. And then I can discuss a bit about the logistics of the resolution itself.
Excuse me, Bill, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but Jane, you need to open the public hearing so that we can continue with this.
Okay. I thought I did. Right. Yeah. So I will open the public hearing at 6:16 PM. Item 6.1. Go for it, Bill.
So the report itself provides the background in regards to the assessment district, the types of project costs allocated to each of the property, the assessment area of 86%. The document itself includes several exhibits. The first exhibit is the assessment district itself. And you can see it's split into 4 different sections here. Sorry. We have the north section, which is area 1, the east section, which is area 2, west is area 3, and south is area 4. This is for the sanitary sewer line that goes from east, flows from west to east, but extends from River Road across the interstate and to Hickory Lane, up Hickory Lane to this point here, and then south on Hickory Lane to the back of these lots, and then back east to Cape Parkway. So the total project cost to the village was approximately $2.8 million. And from there, we allocated that across a total of 656 acres. Now, please note that of that 656 acres, there were properties both in the village of DeForest and then properties also in the town of Vienna. By statute, we cannot assess properties in the town of Vienna. We can only do so for the properties in DeForest, and therefore the way that the resolution is set up here, assessments will go to the properties currently in the village of DeForest and notices of connection fees for the properties in the town of Vienna. Per the resolution, the assessment amount and the connection fees are to be applied at time of connection to the village's sanitary sewer, which is a little bit different from what we may be used to, where there's a schedule for payment. And so again, the last exhibit in this report shows a breakdown of the cost per acre applicable to each of those districts because of different lengths and sizes of the pipe material and the runs. Each district or each sub area had a different cost allocation to it. And so following that, we've broken it down to each parcel and the cost attributed to each parcel. All of the parcels highlighted in gray are those parcels in the town of Vienna. The parcels not highlighted are the parcels in the village of DeForest. We did send notice to all the properties that are in the assessment district. And on that notice, we did inform again that the fees are due at the time of connection. So following the public hearing, there is a resolution on the agenda for your consideration. If that resolution is passed, there are additional steps that staff will have to take here to send out a statement, and then there is a process where we put a lien on the property notifying of the assessment.
I would note, following Bill's presentation, that this hearing was noticed properly. And then I would ask if there's anybody wishing to appear regarding this item. Seeing none, I would ask that maybe we hold our board questions until the resolution. Does that make sense to you? All right, well then, if there's nobody who wishes to appear, I would close this public hearing at 6:21 p.m. I would then open the public hearing on amendment to chapter 13. And note it also was properly noticed. And I would ask Brandy to provide a little overview.
All right, thank you. So the staff report that was included in your packet kind of gave an overview of what we're looking at doing for amendments with the subdivision ordinance. This subdivision ordinance preliminarily was brought to the Planning and Zoning Commission at the beginning of December. And in an effort to allow them some more time to review the ordinances and provide comments. No action was taken by P&Z, and they're going to be looking at taking action on the subdivision ordinance later this winter. However, we had already posted and published the public hearing notice at the village board level, so we decided to go ahead and have the public hearing to be able to provide an opportunity for any public comment on the changes that we're proposing to the subdivision ordinance. Like I said, no action is asked from you for tonight. The subdivision ordinance was included in your packet with the track changes on it, so you could kind of see where we're proposing changes throughout there, and we would invite any comments from the village board to staff prior to the January P&Z meeting if possible. If you have any input on that, happy to answer any questions. If you'd like me to go over the review of potential amendments, I'm happy to do so. But like I said, this will come back to you after it goes back to P&Z
Okay.
for review.
Rebecca, we'll probably,
Just one very quick question. Where is this document? The track changes? It's not in.
Oh, it wasn't in the packet?
No, because there wasn't an agenda item. It was just the hearing.
Oh, it's just the public hearing. I'm sorry. That was my mistake. You're right. I will absolutely provide it to everybody. Thank you.
thank you, Rebecca.
Yep, sorry about that.
Okay. If there is there anyone who wishes to appear on this item? If not, we'll close the public hearing at 6:24 p.m. Moving on to presentations, a presentation by Baker Tilly regarding sewer rate study. Carol and Baker Tilly.
Yeah, so Baker's Tilly has completed their sewer rate study, and Ryan is here to present their results and recommendations.
Hey everyone, my name is Ryan O'Donnell. I'm the director at Baker. Hi everyone, my name is Ryan O'Donnell. I'm a director at Baker Tilly. I've been with the firm for about 12 years and I oversee the utility portion of your financial audit as well as the sewer rate study. You should have a copy of the report. It looks like they're pulling it up now. I'll try to do is just give a brief overview of our process and how we determine what the rates are going to be and walk you through a few of the key schedules that we have highlighted there.
Don't have to reset your password.
All right, so like I said, there's a couple of key schedules that I'll focus on, but first, just a brief kind of overview of the sewer rate study. There's really 3 steps here. The first step is what we refer to as the revenue requirement, which is really determining what your costs are going to be, forecasting for 2025, what your revenues are going to be at your current rates, and what your revenues need to be to cover those costs. So I'd say the first handful of schedules you'll see after Schedule 1 detail how we're coming up with the 2025 forecasted revenue. And really what we're using there is we're looking at your last 12 months of volume data from your meter reads and things like that to forecast out really what's the volume going to be at for the upcoming year with some assumed growth in there as well. Most of the other revenues here come from your budget. The second big part of this, as you'll see, outlines what your costs are going to be for 2025. So the main buckets here, you have your operating and maintenance expenses, the utilities cost of operating. And then if you recall, you have the village, the water or the sewer utility has 2 different rates. You have one that covers village costs, and then you have a separate rate that covers what you're paying to the Madison Metropolitan Sewerage District for treatment. As you can see, that's your largest cost here. So that's split out into a separate rate. And what I should mention too is this rate study is done on a cash basis. So rather than looking at depreciation on your assets, you're looking at what your principal and interest payments are going to be, as well as any other routine capital additions that you might have throughout the year that aren't covered through issuing debt. So basically the schedule over here on the last column covers what we're forecasting and all of that. And that's covered probably through the first 10 schedules. And at your current rates, it's actually the second to last column here, shows what your revenues and expenses are going to be. And the deficit here is what's being forecasted. So what this is saying is overall, there would need to be a 7.5% increase in rates overall to cover what your operating expenses are forecasted at. The second part of the rate study will, again, these schedules here to kind of detail out how we're coming up with a lot of that. And I'm going to, throughout this, if you want to ask questions or at the end, happy to dive into any more detail. But the second part of the rate study is what we call the cost of service study. Once you have the revenue requirement, the cost of service study is done to allocate those costs amongst the various departments or types of rates. So allocating between your volume rate, your fixed customer costs, and any of the other different types of rates shown here. Those costs get allocated to determine what the rate is for each. So this schedule, Schedule 8, summarizes the results of that. And again, if you scroll down through the next few schedules, kind of outline how those numbers are being determined through mostly engineering estimates that stay consistent from year to year. And then lastly, the third process is designing the rates. There's a lot of calculations on these next two schedules, but really this converts into your gallon rate for volume on this schedule for both the village and MMSD. And then the second schedule here outlines what your fixed monthly charge is for each meter size. One thing I did want to point out is you'll see that there's a computed monthly charge and a proposed monthly charge. The computed monthly charge is taking the numbers literally and saying, this is what the rate should be based on what we're currently forecasting. What management's proposing here is, because in a couple instances, there's a very slight decrease in what the calculated charge would be over the current rate. They're proposing to leave those rates on the fixed side the same. I would say, in my experience, that's quite common in this industry, because you might, in a year where you might lower a certain rate, you might look at 2026 and it might increase by double. So just as a means of flattening that out and reducing what a future impact might be, I think that was the kind of the thought process behind proposing leaving the fixed rates the same as they were last year. The last schedule here just kind of outlines for some of the customer classes what the potential impact would be. So as you can see, your average residential, it's going to change by 7.8%, which is about what that first schedule outlined. For the various, depending on what customer you're looking at, you might have a large volume user. So there, obviously, if the volume charge is what's changing, they're going to see more of that impact. Whereas you might have someone more focused on conservation and using less water, they're going to see less of an increase. And down on the schedule breaks out, you have the village here versus the MMSD charge, the two rates that I was talking about.
Small MF. Multifamily. Thank you.
So that's really all I have in terms of walking through. Again, there's a lot of detail in the report, and I'm happy to dive into anything further or answer any questions anyone has.
But the bottom line is the overall recommended increase is that 7.
Correct. Yep.
7.9, is that what it was? Okay.
I think it's 7.53. Yep. And as you can see, I'll show on this first schedule again. I know it's a little hard to see on the screen, but if you were to change rates exactly how they're being computed, this excess number would be close to zero. By leaving those fixed rates and only increasing the volume, you do see a little bit of an excess in terms of revenue increase. But again, a forecast is based on budget. So your budget to actual charges for 2025 are actually going to come in differently, obviously. Thank you. So just wanted to point that out. And that's kind of the impact of leaving those fixed rates the same.
Okay. Questions? Bill Landgraf and then Rebecca.
Yeah, I understand the MMSD increases. there's also $1.5 million. I can explain that increase to, say in January or February, somebody says, why did my rates go up? And I can say Madison Metropolitan Sewer District increased their rates. There's $1.5 million in there for borrowing in fixing of the rates. What does that translate? You know, you go from 44.84 or up to, from 41.61 for your average user to 44.84. Is there a percentage or a dollar amount that's included in the interest payments for that $1.5 million? Is it like 20 cents of that $3 increase, or?
There's not necessarily a dollar calculation. The cost here, if I were to look back at the test year 2024 rate study, I believe there was $392,000 built in for principal and interest. So the increase there is your borrowing for 2025, but I think you're asking of your rate, what portion of that is due to the upcoming borrowing?
Correct. It's minuscule, it seems like. It might be.
Basically, you're building in it's an extra $75,000 over what your prior year debt service was. So that's, I mean, when you're looking at your total deficit, that's probably about 30% of it is being driven by principal and interest.
That answers my question. Thank you. Because people will say, why did my rates go up? And I can say, you know, the majority of it is MSD, and then some of it was for borrowing for future expansion. Thank you.
All right, Rebecca.
Very simple question. This is sewer only, correct? Not water. Okay, thank you.
Okay, other questions? Okay, this is a lot of information for us a lot of numbers to absorb, but there is no action required on this that I'm aware of.
There's a resolution following the presentation.
Okay, but not here.
Not at this point.
Yeah. So with that, I will thank you, and maybe don't go too far until we get through the resolution. So that would be good.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. With that, we will move to old business and new business, which there is none listed, and we'll go to presentation of resolutions and ordinances. Okay, so I'll move to my own paper. 10.1, resolution of 2024-092, a resolution allocating sewer extension costs and levying special assessments against properties specifically benefited by the construction of sewer extensions to serve areas west of Interstate 90, 94, 39. We have information on the resolution and the resolution in your packet.
Motion to approve.
We have a motion. Do we have a
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Are there any comments or questions? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Here we go. Item 10.2, resolution 2024-105, resolution adopting revised user rates for the DeForest sewer utility.
Motion to approve.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any comments or discussion or questions? Okay, if not, did you have a question, Tushidra? Oh, all right. All right, we got that covered then. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 10.3, Resolution 2024-106, a resolution accepting a quit claim deed to Outlot 1, certified survey map number 14582 in the Village of DeForest from Bear Tree Farms, Inc.
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion to approve and a second. Any comments, questions? If not, did you have, okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, moving along. Item 10.4, Resolution 2024-107, a resolution authorizing the village president and clerk to execute an amendment to the fiscal services agreement between the Village of Windsor and the DeForest Area Joint Center Commission. Community.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any comments or questions? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Item 10.5, Resolution 2024-108, a resolution authorizing the village administrator to execute a contract with Associated Appraisal Consultants for property assessment services.
Move to approve.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Did one of you make a second? Okay. All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favors? You got any discussion? All right.
I just wanted to ask a question. The way I was looking through the contract, there's different dollar amounts per the year, and it seems like, isn't it, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's like an additional, was it 77 or 75,000 for when they do an assessment update or whatever the term was?
Yeah,
I thought that was an every year thing, but it seems like it's an every other year.
yeah, so we are, so the current contract with Associated Appraisals expired or in 2022, we are on a year-to-year contract with them. So we have not received an updated quote since 2017. Since then, our parcels have basically doubled. So the pricing that you see here, provides a different level of service than the current contract that we have. So every year, for the amounts that you see on the screen here, that's the cost for maintenance of the assessment roll. That includes things like parcel splits, building permits, just to maintain the roll. In addition to that, there are costs associated with a full market adjustment. That's done in 26 and 28. Under the current contract, that's done every year. So we're going to every other year here. And so what is represented here, the last paragraph is that we're taking the cost of the maintenance annually and the cost of the full value every other two, and we're spreading that over basically the 5-year contract. So that gets us to about $67,000 per year over the next 5 years, which is comparable to the expense that we have in our current budget.
Okay. Does that answer your question?
Yep, that answers my question. I think mainly what I was getting at is that it's, say, every other year we're going to reassess rather than the every year, which sort of became a standard lately.
Yeah, well, it's not a reassessment, it's a adjustment. Yeah. And then, yeah, that's correct. So it provides year-to-year relief to property taxpayers. However, there is, since we're farther away from that adjustment, there may be larger increments, whether up or down. So the variation changes more significantly than if we were to do it year to year.
Okay. Other questions? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Check register was available in your packet. Committee, commission, and board reports. An update regarding DeForest Area Library. Tashidra?
Nothing to report.
Okay. DeForest Public Safety Commission? Pauline?
Just an operator's license approval.
Okay. DeForest Area Community and Senior Center.
The holiday festivities are all in order and everything's feeling very warm and jolly and everybody's full of joy. So that's great. We've been reviewing our budget and we are doing really well this year. We're on track. We're not going to go over and by the looks of it. And we are also started reviewing our strategic plan and seeing if any adjustments or changes should be done there. And lastly, last week, this was every 3 months, we have the half century committee meeting, which we had. And for those of you that don't know what that is, that's the committee that is in charge of the property. And nothing came up there, but we had the meeting and we're good to go for January. And Bill, question?
Just wanted to add that Al and I met with Community Center, Natalie over there, their attorney, Windsor's Tina from Windsor and their attorney, and then also Diana in talking about the intergovernmental agreement. It was a productive meeting and we believe we'll have a draft of that agreement to each of the village boards and town board second part or later part of January. So I expect to see that at the like January 21st meeting, I believe.
Okay. And I would say that Jan's been doing a really good job on negotiating regarding a variety of issues. We had a meeting on the whole issue of how we're going to structure things going forward. And she's gotten to be quite good at it. So thank you for the work. Community Development Authority. You want to go ahead and do it?
We sat through a prolonged presentation on housing tax credits. We exercised an option to purchase DeForest Liquor Mart, and we approved a budget for what will hopefully soon be our formerly public housing property.
So, great. Planning and Zoning Commission, Jim.
We had a couple concepts presented to us from Classic Homes in the, I guess, what is it? It's no longer Hawthorne Point. Anyway, in the ABS proper area. There was DeForest Yards has done a bit of a redesign of their, I'll call it a community center area. Nice improvement. The Peterson Crossing Outlot, I'll call it, that was actually on the agenda tonight here. Chapter 13, which we talked about as far as a public hearing, that will be rediscussed and brought back to this board. And we also talked a little bit about Chapter 15, and again, that is going to go back to the planning and zoning before that progresses. And there was quite a lengthy concept or discussion on an on-building sign that is that in Vienna? It's along the interstate there, but it's in DeForest. Near Truck Country, there's I forget the name of the company, but.
Skid loaders.
Yep. And that's all I had.
Want to keep going with Public Services Committee?
Public Services, we talked a lot about fluoride.
It was a lovely meeting.
And that will be coming to Village Board, I think the second meeting of the Village Board in January. So you'll hear officially that the recommendation from that committee was to discontinue fluoridation of our water. Discontinue. That's it.
All right. Forest Windsor Fire and EMS District. I don't think there was anything major. We talked a lot about revenue and number of calls and staffing. So, and the RFP. Yes, Bill.
We are negotiating the intergovernmental agreement for that one too.
Yeah.
So it is over with Windsor right now, and we expect to hopefully hear from them soon, and we will bring that to the board too when that's ready.
Good. With that, committee commission board minutes were in your packet. I don't have a DCCBA report unless you do, Bill. And then we have discussion and possible action regarding village board meeting dates changes due to conflicts in 2025. You have those dates you can pull up. Thank you. So this was in your packet. We're trying to avoid both conflict and having a meeting, for instance, in January when staff just gets back. So we're recommending just having one meeting in January. We're recommending a that the February 18th meeting falls on spring primary election and with an election for Supreme Court and county exec, there's likely to be a primary. So we're recommending moving it to Thursday, February 20th. And then note, if there's not a primary, we can have our regular date. And then on April 1 is the date of the spring election. So it's suggested that the meeting be moved to Thursday, April 3rd. I think we need action on those.
Move to approve.
We have a motion and a second. Any comments or questions? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right. With that, I'd entertain a motion to convene into closed section.
Motion to move to a closed session.
Second.
All right. We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Trustee Landgraf,
Aye.
trustee Simpson,
Aye.
trustee Little, trustee Stefan Hagenhan,
Aye.
trustee Witherspoon,
Aye.
trustee Allen,
Aye.
President Cahill Wolfgram.
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0.
All right, here we go. We are back in open session. And we will move into item 17. I did want to say, I learned under any other business coming before the board that Penny Noble has celebrated 30 years here. And so congratulate her when you see her. And that's a big accomplishment. So thank you, Penny.
Thank you, Penny.
Yeah. Yes.
I would like to just say one other thing. I mean, we had a big tragedy in Dane County yesterday. There's quite a few people in our community who were directly impacted by that. And I think we need to, if you know those people, I would encourage people to reach out to them and just let them know you're there for them. Having been through something, not in a school setting, but in a very tragic, a big tragedy when my daughter was about 12. I can tell you that these kids are going to be experiencing annual issues of some depression every single year for years to come. It will diminish over time, but they're going to be experiencing a lot over this next year. So if you know anybody that was directly impacted, I encourage you to reach out and just ask them, hey, how are you doing, from time to time? And don't just say, oh, I'm just fine. Dig a little bit deeper. Have that conversation.
Thank you. All right. And I will note on that item that the chief has sent police officers to all of our schools to make people feel that we were being vigilant and they were safe. So, all right, if there's nothing else, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
We have several, pick one. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. We have motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.